Under the golden light of late afternoon, an elderly man in a wheelchair musters the strength to raise his hand in a final salute. His eyes glisten with tears as he gazes ahead. Before him, an entire town stands in somber silence. Dozens of neighbors and strangers alike, all dressed in old military uniforms, saluting back with heartfelt reverence. In that single moment, the dying veteran's last wish is no longer just a dream. It's real. Just a few days earlier, no one believed this could happen. In a small town without a single active soldier, who could grant such a wish? Who would perform a ceremony when no one had a uniform left to wear? The odds were against him, until an entire community decided to prove that gratitude never dies. 3 days earlier, the veteran was just Frank Miller, an 86-year-old war veteran spending his final days in a modest house on Maple Street. Decades had passed since his time as a young soldier, but the memories of service and sacrifice still lived vividly in his heart. Every morning, Frank would sit by the window, gazing at the flag on his porch and the fading photos of his platoon. The lines on his face and the distant look in his eyes told a story of bravery, loss, and undying loyalty. On this quiet morning, Frank's trembling hands carefully unfolded a worn piece of paper, a letter from an old comrade preserved since the war. His eyes scanned the faded handwriting, and a tear rolled down his cheek as he remembered those he had lost. The letter spoke of brotherhood, of a promise to never forget each other. Reading it now, Frank felt both sorrow and gratitude well up inside. If you've ever held on to a precious letter or memory from someone you miss, feel free to share it in the comments below. Sometimes a simple memory is all we have, and sharing it keeps their story alive. Frank exhaled shakily and folded the letter back. His granddaughter Emily noticed his glistening eyes as she brought him his morning tea. She was a warm-hearted young woman in her 20s, deeply devoted to her grandfather. Concerned, Emily knelt beside his armchair and gently asked, "Grandpa, are you all right? What does the letter say?" Frank managed a faint smile. "It's from my friend Charlie. We served together." His voice was frail, heavy with years of unspoken emotions. "He wrote this when the war ended. We promised we'd always salute each other's service, no matter what." Frank's voice trembled with emotion, and Emily squeezed his hand supportively. That afternoon, as Emily helped Frank rest, he revealed what had been on his mind. In halting words, Frank confessed his last wish. "Before I go, I'd like to have one final ceremony, one last salute, like we used to do for our fallen brothers." His cloudy eyes searched his granddaughter's face, worried she might find the request odd. Instead, Emily felt her throat tighten, holding back tears. She knew how much a soldier's salute meant to him, a symbol of respect, dignity, and farewell. Emily stroked his thin white hair gently. "You deserve that, Grandpa," she whispered, her voice resolute despite the lump in her throat. "We'll make it happen. I promise." Frank closed his eyes, relief and gratitude washing over him. He had been prepared to leave this world quietly, but now a small spark of hope flickered within him. He could almost picture it, standing one last time, saluting and being saluted, honoring a lifetime of service. That evening, Emily sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand, determined to fulfill her grandfather's wish. She called the local veterans office and the nearest military base, explaining Frank's situation and his dream of a final salute ceremony. However, bureaucracy and short notice made it difficult. No official honor guard could be dispatched on such short notice, especially to a tiny town like theirs. Undeterred, Emily reached out to neighbors and family friends. Many remembered Frank's kindness over the years. He had always been the quiet hero of their town, the old man who raised the flag at the park every morning, despite his age. Word began to spread around the community about Frank's last wish. A few retired servicemen lived in the area, but most had long since packed away or lost their uniforms. Some worried looks were exchanged. How could they organize a military-style ceremony with so few resources? Still, no one wanted to let Frank down.
The townspeople felt they owed him a debt of gratitude for his service and his gentle presence in their lives. A small group gathered in Emily's living room that night, neighbors, friends, local veterans, brainstorming how to give Frank the tribute he deserved. Their faces were determined yet anxious. Time was against them, and Frank's health was fading. Even in uncertainty, the warmth of human kindness was starting to glow in that little living room. If you believe in the power of community and want to hear more heartfelt stories like this, please consider subscribing to our channel. By joining us, you become part of these incredible journeys of compassion. One idea shone brightest: to find every former soldier or scout in the region, anyone who ever wore a uniform, and ask them to help. Old phone directories were pulled out, social media groups lit up with messages, and calls were made deep into the night. Emily wrote a post online. "My grandfather, an 86-year-old veteran, has a final wish: to receive one last salute. We have no active soldiers here, but if anyone out there still has an old uniform or even just the heart to salute him, we welcome you. Ceremony this Saturday at 5 p.m. in front of his home." She prayed that someone, anyone who saw it, would respond.
As Frank slept unaware, his modest home became mission control for a heartfelt operation. The clock was ticking, but hope, once just a spark in an old man's heart, was now igniting a flame in everyone around him. The community was mobilizing, holding its breath that their efforts would be enough to honor a man who had given them so much without ever asking for anything in return. Thursday morning arrived with a chill in the autumn air. Emily anxiously refreshed her post online and checked her phone for any messages. Frank, unaware of the flurry of activity, spent the day resting and softly humming an old military tune on the porch. By noon, a couple of neighbors had reached out. Tom, a middle-aged man who had served in the reserves years ago, knocked on their door offering help. He had an old dress jacket from his service days and insisted on digging it out of his attic. Another call came from Mr. Garcia, the retired Navy officer who lived 2 streets over. He still had his formal whites and was ready to stand guard for Frank. Emily thanked them both profusely, her heart buoyed by these first responses. However, as night fell on Thursday, only a handful of people had confirmed. Emily smiled bravely at Frank during dinner, not letting him see her worry. Frank, sensing the effort she was making, simply patted her hand. "Even if it's just one soldier, it will mean the world to me," he said, his voice gentle and sincere. Emily fought back tears at his words, nodding and promising herself she wouldn't let him down. By Friday morning, the story had gained a little momentum. The local radio station mentioned a town's effort to honor one of its own, and a small article in the regional newspaper told of Frank's wish. A local journalist even dropped by to interview Emily, taking a photo of Frank's weathered face, smiling humbly from his wheelchair. These efforts sparked a flicker of hope. Perhaps more people would hear about the ceremony now. Sure enough, as the day progressed, messages started trickling in from beyond the town. A veteran from a neighboring county said he and his 2 sons, both former Army, would make the drive on Saturday, uniforms in tow. An elderly couple, both Air Force veterans, emailed to say they'd be there in their old blue dress uniforms to salute Frank. The community center's phone rang constantly with folks offering to help. One promised to bring an American flag big enough for a proper flag ceremony. Another offered a bugle player to perform the traditional farewell tune. Emily was astonished by the generosity pouring in. In between phone calls, she stepped into Frank's room to check on him. He was dozing, clutching that old letter to his chest. His face looked peaceful, as if dreaming of his brothers in arms. Emily realized they had to make this happen soon. Frank's breaths were shallow, and each day he grew weaker. She quietly called the doctor, who warned her that Frank might not have much time left and should avoid strain. Emily's heart pounded. They couldn't delay the ceremony. It had to be the next day as planned. Friday evening, the front porch became a gathering spot. A few local volunteers practiced a salute formation in the yard, trying their best to recall drills from years past. Tom had found not only his jacket, but also convinced a couple of his old Army buddies to come, even if all they had were parts of uniforms or just civilian clothes with their medals pinned on. They practiced with broomsticks as rifles for a rifle salute, laughing at themselves but determined to get it right. The sight was a mix of the solemn and the sweetly improvised. Old friends working together by porch light to honor one more of their own. Yet as the stars came out that night, Emily felt a gnawing anxiety. What if this still wasn't enough? Perhaps 20 people might show up, maybe 30 at best. Would that be enough to truly surprise Frank, to make him feel that grand sense of honor one last time? She found herself alone in the kitchen past midnight, hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee, worry etched on her face. In her exhaustion, a tear slipped down her cheek. "Please, let this work." She whispered to herself, a quiet prayer in the empty kitchen. She had done everything she could, and now it was in fate's hands. What would you do if someone you love had a final wish hanging in the balance? Would you keep fighting against the odds? Share your thoughts or words of support in the comments below. Sometimes, even the smallest hope can lead to a miracle. On Saturday morning, the day of the ceremony, Emily was jolted awake by the sound of car doors slamming and hushed voices outside. She rushed to the window and gasped at the sight unfolding on their sleepy little street. People were arriving, not just a few, but dozens upon dozens. Men and women of all ages, some in pressed uniforms adorned with medals, others in mismatched camouflage or navy blues that had been pulled from closets, and even a group of Boy Scouts in neat khaki uniforms, all coming to pay tribute. They came from different directions, some having driven through the night from 2 towns over, some local but unknown to Frank, all converging now in front of the Miller house. By noon, the quiet street had transformed into something resembling a military base on parade day. Neighbors brought out chairs and coolers of water for the arriving guests. The local police blocked off the road to ensure everyone's safety as more cars rolled in. An impromptu honor guard unit was forming under the guidance of Mr. Garcia, who took charge with the crisp authority of his Navy days. Veterans from the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines, even a former Coast Guardsman, stood together, adjusting their caps and swapping old salutes with warm smiles. Some younger volunteers, unable to find uniforms, helped by handing out small American flags to onlookers and setting up a podium and sound system for the ceremony. Emily moved through the growing crowd in amazement. Every time she tried to thank someone, they shook their heads and thanked her instead for giving them a chance to honor one of their own. A frail old gentleman in a World War II uniform leaned on his cane and told her, "I drove 4 hours to be here. I wasn't gonna miss this chance to salute a brother." A middle-aged woman in an army jacket quietly mentioned that her father, who'd passed away, would have wanted her to come in his place. There were tears in many eyes even now, just at the anticipation of what was about to happen. The sense of camaraderie and gratitude was palpable. Inside the house, Frank sat by the window, marveling at the unusual bustle outside. He didn't yet grasp the full scale. He thought perhaps a few neighbors were gathering to visit him. He chuckled weakly, turning to Emily when she entered his room. "Seems like we have company," he said with a gentle smile. Emily could hardly contain her emotions as she helped him into his best suit. It wasn't a uniform, but she pinned his old medals to the lapel. She placed his battered military cap, the one he'd kept since the war, snugly on his head. Frank's hands shook not from frailty alone, but from anticipation. Trembling voice, Is it time?" he asked, voice quavering. Emily took a steadying breath. "Yes, Grandpa, it's time," she said, tears shining in her eyes. She wheeled him towards the front door. Frank's heart pounded against his ribs. Through the doorway, he could glimpse rows of people standing at attention in the street. The sunlight outside was bright. He squinted, unsure if he was seeing clearly. Could it be? Uniforms, dozens of them, and the faces of strangers waiting earnestly. Frank swallowed hard, emotions swelling in his chest. When Emily rolled Frank out onto the porch, a hush fell over the crowd. All eyes turned to the frail veteran in the wheelchair now appearing before them. For a moment, Frank was overwhelmed by the sight. There were far more people than he ever imagined. Veterans of all branches, complete strangers wearing their old uniforms, neighbors young and old holding flags, all gathered for him. Frank's lips parted in awe. "Oh, oh my," he breathed, voice choked. He lifted a trembling hand in greeting, unsure whether this was reality or a final, beautiful dream. Mr. Garcia stepped forward, giving a respectful nod to Frank. "Sir, we're here to fulfill your wish," he said, his own voice thick with feeling. "Today, this salute is for you." Frank's eyes brimmed with tears as he nodded gratefully. Emily stood behind her grandfather's chair, resting a hand on his shoulder, her heart bursting with pride and relief. The ceremony was about to begin, far beyond anything she had hoped for. Mr. Garcia cleared his throat and stepped back into line with the other veterans. He barked a gentle command, voice carrying with practiced authority. "Honor guard, attend!" In unison, the gathered veterans and volunteers straightened their postures. The little street fell silent, save for the rustling of the breeze. Frank looked around in wonder as, on Mr. Garcia's signal, two uniformed men at the front unfurled a crisp American flag and held it up for all to see. A young Boy Scout, his face solemn, brought forth a bugle and lifted it to his lips. The first plaintive notes of taps sounded, clear and haunting. The melancholy melody drifted through the air, each note a farewell and a thank you. Frank's chest tightened as memories of fallen comrades and long-ago battles swirled in his mind. Tears traced down the old soldier's face, but he did not wipe them away. He stood, or rather sat, at attention, honoring those memories. Emily gently touched his shoulder, and he reached up to hold her hand with trembling fingers as the bugle song faded. When the final note hung in the air, Mr. Garcia called out, "Present arms!" In a synchronized motion, every person in uniform raised their right hand to their brow in a proud salute. Hundreds of palms glinted in the sunlight in that instant. Neighbors and bystanders placed their hands over their hearts. Emily whispered, "You can do it, Grandpa." And with resolve, Frank tried to push himself up from his wheelchair. Two veterans stepped forward to help steady him. Summoning all his strength, Frank rose shakily to his feet. His frail form wavered for a moment, but then he stood tall as a soldier one final time. Frank lifted his hand in a return salute. Despite the weakness in his arm, he held it as steadily as he could. He gazed at the sea of people saluting him, the faces blurred by his tears. In that moment, Frank Miller felt the fullest weight of honor and love he had ever known. He gave a slight nod, a silent thank you to everyone before him. A gentle hush enveloped the street. Even the birds seemed to pause in witness. Finally, Tom, standing at the front in his old army jacket, gave the command to lower arms. The crowd relaxed, and a warm ripple of applause and cheers broke out. Many wiped their eyes. Emily threw her arms around her grandfather in a careful hug, mindful of his unsteady legs. Frank's face was wet with tears, and a radiant smile shone through. The smile of a man whose last wish had been fulfilled beyond his dreams. He whispered, thank you all," though his voice was barely audible. Somehow, everyone there felt those words. One by one, people approached Frank to shake his hand or pat his shoulder. The World War II veteran with the cane gave him a salute at close range and murmured, "Fair winds and following seas, soldier." A young woman who had never met Frank before hugged Emily, saying she was inspired by her devotion. In the crowd were generations, from gray-haired heroes to children holding their parents' hands, all united in that extraordinary send-off. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, the impromptu ceremony came to an end. Frank was exhausted, but happier than anyone had seen him in years. Under the golden sky, he mustered one last salute to the gathering, which was met with a final round of salutes from those present. It was as if he were acknowledging each soul that came. With that, Frank allowed Emily and the others to help him back inside. His duty, at long last, was complete. Later that night, after the excitement had quieted and the crowd had long gone home, Frank Miller passed away peacefully in his sleep. He drifted off with a content heart, knowing that he was not alone and not forgotten. His final wish had been granted in the most beautiful way imaginable. In the days that followed, the story of the little town's farewell to their local hero spread far and wide, touching countless hearts. People who heard it found themselves wiping tears and smiling at the thought that compassion and gratitude still thrived in the world. Emily, though grieving, felt an overwhelming sense of peace. Her grandfather's last memories were of salutes and smiles, of honor and community. In her heart, she knew that whenever she would miss him, she could remember that day and say, "Humanity isn't gone. It lives in each salute, each helping hand." Stories like this remind us of the goodness still left in the world. If Frank's story moved you and you believe such true stories deserve to be heard, please subscribe to our channel. Join us in honoring these moments of compassion and hope, and keep the spirit of humanity alive. With that, we close this chapter of the True Stories Archive, a chapter that proves one act of respect can echo in countless hearts. Until the next story, take care and cherish the good around you.